I am going to be completely honest with you today. No sugarcoating, no false optimism, no pretending that what we have watched over the first two games of this series is anything other than what it actually is. The Cleveland Cavaliers are the better team right now. They have controlled this series from the opening tip of game one, and they are heading into Toronto with full confidence and full momentum. And if the Raptors do not make some serious, meaningful, real changes before game three tips off at Scotiabank Arena, this series is going to end in a sweep, and this fan base is going to be left with a very bitter taste heading into the offseason. But here is the thing, and this is genuinely important. There is still something worth playing for here. There is still pride. There is still the opportunity to show this city, this league, and most importantly, this young roster itself, what this team is actually capable of when everything is on the line. And if you want to understand exactly what needs to change, exactly who needs to step up, and exactly why some of the decisions being made right now are not working, then you are in the right place. Subscribe to this channel right now because we are covering every moment of this playoff run with complete honesty. And today that means having some uncomfortable but necessary conversations. Let's get into all of it. Let's start with the most important and most frustrating storyline of this entire series so far, and that is Brandon Ingram. Because this is a conversation that needs to be had directly and without any diplomatic dancing around the reality of what we have seen through two games. Management brought Ingram to Toronto with a very specific purpose in mind. They needed a big-time shot maker, a player who could create his own offense, who could score from multiple levels, who could be the guy in big moments when the defense collapses around Scotty Barnes and the rest of the offense needs a release valve. And to be fair, we saw flashes of exactly that player in about a quarter and a half to start game one. Ingram was engaged, he was assertive, he was getting to spots and making shots, and then somewhere in the middle of that first game something shifted, and it has not shifted back since. The numbers through two games tell a story that is genuinely difficult to defend. 17 points in game one on 9 field goal attempts, 1 shot attempt in the second half of that game, and then game two was more of the same. A player who looks at times like he would rather not be the center of attention in a playoff environment than like a guy who is ready to take over a series. And I want to be precise about what the problem actually is, because I think there has been some imprecise framing around this topic even within the Raptors organization. When Darko Rajakovic made his post-game comments suggesting Ingram had been aggressive but just was not being rewarded, I have to respectfully push back on that characterization, because that description more accurately applies to Scotty Barnes, who has been physical and assertive and has genuinely been fighting through contact to try to create advantages. Ingram's issue is different. His issue is that he is not initiating contact. He is not attacking the rim. He is operating too much in a passive, catch-and-react mode rather than the attack-first mentality that makes him genuinely dangerous. And yes, Cleveland has Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen waiting at the rim as two of the better shot blockers in the league, and that is a real deterrent. But the more pressing problem is that Ingram is getting stopped by Dean Wade. Dean Wade, before he even gets close enough to the rim for Mobley and Allen to matter. That is not a rim protection problem. That is an engagement and aggression problem, and it needs to be fixed before game three tips off. Now, here is the thing I want to be clear about. This is not entirely on Ingram as an individual. Context matters. Without Emmanuel Quickley, the Raptors have the worst offense of any playoff team remaining in this bracket, and it is not particularly close. That is an almost impossible environment to ask a primary scorer to thrive in. The spacing is compromised, the ball movement is compromised, the gravity that Quickley provides as a shooter and a playmaker creates ripple effects throughout the offense that are genuinely difficult to replicate without him. And Ingram, as laid back as his personality tends to run, does have a competitor inside him. We have all seen it at different points in his career. The guy who went into Phoenix as a heavy underdog with the Pelicans and absolutely torched a favored Suns team in the playoffs, that version of Ingram exists. We have seen him in Toronto moments this season where he looked absolutely unstoppable. The question is, how do you unlock that version of him in a series where he clearly needs a spark to get out of his own head? The answer starts with putting him in better situations offensively. And it also starts with some honest lineup decisions that the coaching staff has been hesitant to make but can no longer afford to avoid. The elephant in the room is Jakob Poeltl. He has been ineffective through the first two games in ways that are actively hurting this team. He played 9 minutes in the first half of game two and then did not play again. And look, I am not here to bury Poeltl as a player. He has been genuinely valuable to this franchise over the course of the season. But in this specific matchup against this specific Cleveland team, starting him has not been working. He needs to come off the bench. That conversation has to happen before game 3, and the coaching staff has to be willing to have it. Because the conversation about starting Colin Murray-Boyles is one that I think has been building all series long and now needs to become a reality. This rookie has been the most encouraging Raptors storyline through 2 games in ways that should completely reframe how we think about this team's rotation. The numbers are one thing: 14 points, 7 rebounds, 7 assists in his playoff debut in Game 1, and continued strong play in Game 2, but the numbers almost undersell what Murray-Boyles has brought to this series in terms of energy, defensive mobility, and basketball intelligence. This team is simply better when he is on the floor. Not marginally better, noticeably, measurably, obviously better. His ability to guard multiple positions, to navigate pick and roll coverages, to be in the right place defensively and make smart decisions offensively without forcing anything, those are not rookie qualities. Those are qualities of a mature, confident basketball player who belongs in this lineup regardless of his draft class. Start him. It is time. And then there is Jacoby Walter, who has been playing well beyond his years in this series in ways that deserve a lot more recognition than he is currently getting. Walter brings exactly what this Toronto offense is desperately missing right now: shooting, real legitimate floor spacing shooting that forces defenders to honor him and creates room for Barnes and Ingram to operate. His defensive capabilities are also legitimate. He is not a liability on that end, which means you are not sacrificing anything by having him on the floor. If Quickly cannot go in Game 3, Walter should be starting. And even if Quickly does return and takes his spot in the starting 5, Walter still needs to be getting 30 meaningful minutes in this game, not spot minutes, not garbage time minutes, real important minutes in the first and third quarters where his shooting can actually impact the game. The lineups that have Ingram, Shed, and Barnes, or Ingram, Barnes, and Barrett as the primary combinations have been getting absolutely torched by Cleveland in this series. Something has to change in terms of who is surrounding those guys, and Walter is the most available and most impactful solution to that specific problem. The Quickly situation remains the wild card hanging over all of this. If he can suit up for Game 3, even at reduced capacity, the dynamic of this series changes somewhat. Rajakovic was clear about how much the team missed him and the specific things he provides: the organization of the offense, the shooting gravity, the screens that Poltol sets for him that create so much of what works in that pairing. And interestingly, it goes both ways. Poltol also tends to look significantly more effective when he is sharing the floor with Quickly, which is actually the strongest argument for finding a way to get a Poltol Quickly pairing in some second unit or late first quarter minutes, even if Murray-Boyles is in the starting lineup. The two of them together have a real rhythm that benefits both players. You keep Murray-Boyles starting and earning his expanded role, and you find a specific window, late first quarter, early second quarter, somewhere in the third, to put Quickly and Poltol together and let that pairing do what it does. That is not complicated roster management. That is smart rotation design. Now let's talk about Scottie Barnes, because this is the section of this conversation that I want every single Raptors fan to pay close attention to. The entire premise of this franchise's direction over the last several years has been built around Barnes. They made the decision to move on from Pascal Siakam. They watched OG Anunoby go to New York. They let Fred VanVleet walk. They accelerated a rebuild and committed everything: the picks, the cap space, the organizational identity, to the belief that Scottie Barnes can be a superstar. And this season, he had his best year as a professional. He was everything we hoped he could be during the regular season, but the playoffs are a completely different stage, and the playoffs require a different kind of moment, a defining moment, the kind of moment that becomes part of a player's legacy. The fact is that Barnes has shown flashes of being completely unstoppable in the second halves of both games in this series. When he decides to be aggressive, when he puts his head down and attacks, he is genuinely a problem for Cleveland that they have no clean answer for. His combination of size, athleticism, and skill is unique. There is nobody on the Cavaliers roster who is ideally built to stop him when he is operating at his best level. But flashes are not enough. Stretches are not enough. What Barnes needs in Game 3, in front of a home crowd that is going to be absolutely electric and desperate to give this team every possible advantage, is a sustained, complete, dominant performance. The kind that makes the highlight reel, the kind that makes the national broadcast have to acknowledge that this kid from Toronto is something truly special. Give him the ball, build the offense around him attacking, surround him with shooters, Walter, Sandro Mamukelashvili, Ingram to space the floor and let him do damage, Murray-Boyles as the safety valve inside. This is the formula that has worked for this team at its best moments all season, and it needs to be the formula that this coaching staff commits to going into the home games. And the defensive numbers on Barnes this series deserve a mention because they also tell a story worth paying attention to. He finished with the 5th most defensive player of the year votes in the entire NBA this season. He was arguably the best defensive player in the league, not named Victor Wembanyama. When you look at his combination of blocks, steals, and highlight reel impact plays, but through 2 games in Cleveland, he had 0 blocks and 0 steals in Game 1 and just 2 steals and a block in Game 2. That is not vintage Scotty Barnes on defense. That is a guy who is still finding his footing in a playoff environment and has not yet had the moment where everything clicks and he reminds everybody in the building exactly who he is. Game 3 at home is that opportunity. And if this franchise is going to be able to look back on this series as something other than a painful sweep, Barnes needs to seize it. The defensive game plan conversation is also one that cannot be avoided at this point. The debate about switching versus hedging versus fighting through screens has been a genuine point of contention even among analysts who watch this team every single night. And the reality, as with most defensive debates, is that neither extreme is the full answer. The Raptors tried switching less frequently in Game 1 and got absolutely torched by Harden and Mitchell working the pick and roll to perfection. The argument for switching more has merit. It keeps bodies in front of ball handlers and removes some of the clean looks that Cleveland has been manufacturing through their offensive actions. But the problem with switching is that it creates mismatches that Mitchell and Harden are extraordinarily skilled at identifying and exploiting. These are 2 of the most intelligent offensive players in the league. They will find the mismatch, they will attack it, and they will make the right play 9 times out of 10. The most interesting tactical suggestion I have seen in the wake of Game 2 is the idea of putting Ingram on Evan Mobley and essentially daring Cleveland to try to win through their big man rather than allowing Harden and Mitchell to dominate every possession. If Ingram is guarding Mobley, Cleveland's entire offensive structure has to adjust. Their primary ball handlers can no longer count on Ingram being a soft target in pick and roll coverages, and it forces the Cavaliers to ask whether Mobley can consistently create advantages in isolation against a long, athletic defender. It is an unconventional approach, but unconventional approaches are sometimes exactly what a team needs when the conventional ones have been failing for 2 straight games. The bottom line is this: the Raptors are not winning this series. That is the honest truth, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. But there is a version of Games 3 and 4 in Toronto where this team shows the city, shows the league, and shows themselves exactly what they are capable of, where Barnes has his moment, where Ingram responds like the player we know he can be, where Murray Boyles continues to cement his status as a future star, where the home crowd lifts this young group to performances that make Cleveland genuinely sweat. That version of this series is still possible. And it starts with the coaching staff being bold enough to make the lineup changes that the evidence is screaming for, and the players being bold enough to match the intensity of the moment. This city deserves that. This fan base has been patient through a long, difficult rebuild, and they deserve to see their team go down swinging if they go down at all. Let's see it in Game 3. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What do you need to see from the Raptors in Toronto to feel good about where this franchise is heading? Let's keep this conversation going.